Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous, hosted by Bruce Hutchin. I'm so happy you've joined us today, and you're going to find out a lot about whitetail hunting on the show. This is Whitetail Rendezvous, episode number 373. Hey, folks, we're heading out to Nebraska today, and we're going to talk to Jason Obermiller and Eric Fitzgerald. Jason has a master's in biology, and Eric's got over 26 years as an agronomist for his own company. They both know what it takes to grow cattle and whitetails. And for the first time ever, I talked to a guy. They're going to talk about having control herd that they can watch and monitor so they can see the difference in everything else they do outside that control. So you have one herd that just lives off the land, no inducement of anything at all, no minerals, no special crops, no food plot, no anything different than what they just got in the natural. Then they have another herd that's all about how to grow a better herd. And the differences are intriguing. I learned a lot. So get a pencil and paper. You're going to enjoy these guys. It's never too early to think about food plots. Whitetail Rendezvous has an ebook for you. Just simply text 33444 food plot to get your copy. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host, and we're heading out to Loup City, Nebraska. What the heck is in Loup City, Nebraska? Well, Rackolgy lives there. Who's Rackolgy? Well, Eric Fitzgerald and Jason Obermiller are going to tell us all about Rackolgy today and a lot more about hunting big whitetails in Nebraska. Hey, guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hey, Bruce.
So let's start off with Eric. Eric, you've got a long history. You got a degree from universities in agronomy and an MBA from the University of Nebraska, Kearney. I mean, you've been a student of this industry for a long time. And tell me that role that played into the formation of Rackolgy.
Well, not to get too long-winded, but I've always had a place for agriculture in my heart. I grew up in agriculture, and knowing that I wanted to pursue a career in there, I decided that I better try to find out what degrees were available. And when I started college, I wasn't quite sure what an agronomist was or what agronomy was, and decided that I'd get my prerequisites done and try to figure out what I was going to do. And lo and behold, the university, I guess backstep a little bit. We, born and raised in rural, Nebraska, I knew all my family farmed, and I knew what the agronomist role played in my both my grandfather's and my cousin's farms. And so I always kind of knew that there was always somebody out there kind of helping my family out, knowing, what's out there as far as insects, diseases, when they should water, when they should hold off watering. And so going to college, finishing up my last 2 years, I did an internship with a full-time agronomist in South Central Nebraska. And after the first week, I knew I found my niche where I wanted to be. And once I found that, it's like they say, when you go to college or you're doing anything, and you don't quite know what you want to do until it hits you. And that's when it hit me that summer working for him. I knew that was my place. And so later on, after I graduated, I knew I wanted to go after my MBA and get some business background and finish that while I was working for that same agronomist and working for an agronomy lab during the wintertime. And basically got the opportunity to move from Kearney, Nebraska up to Loup City and do agronomy and sell seed corn for a company, and decided I'd take that as and then when I found out, I guess the opportunity and how big the area was, I figured I better jump on the chance. So I accepted the position up here in Loup City, and it's hard to believe that's been almost 20 years ago already, but so decided to branch out on my own in 2004, doing agronomy. And I guess the timing and everything coming up here, Loup City, led me to meet Jason here. I've loved to hunt and fish my whole life, and that's, I guess, one story of how I really came to like agronomy is when we were out goose hunting with a friend of mine, and we had a guy pull up, and he had we had a ragtag decoys, Canadian geese decoys, and we had some silhouettes and stuff that we handmade just because we didn't have enough money to go buy a bunch of decoys. We had them out, and another gentleman pulled up a little later than we did, and we started talking to him and figured, well, one set is better than two sets, we'll just hunt together. And he had a brand new truck and trailer and all these Bigfoot decoys. And when he finally, we were sitting there in between the flocks of geese coming in, we were talking, and I asked him what he did, and he said he was an agronomist. And then he goes, I really like to work really hard during the summertime, get my soil sampling done in the early fall. He goes, I got all winter to hunt and do whatever I wanted to do. And that kind of stuck in my mind as like, that's kind of the itinerary I kind of want for my life. And so with both of those, I just fell in love with agronomy and moved up to Loop City here and did agronomy work here since 2001 and started my business in 2004, actually. And met Jason probably shortly after, probably in 2003, 2004, and took a deer into him. He's also a taxidermist here, and we kind of hit it off then, and then we've been friends ever since. And when we started talking about this, Jason brought this to me, and I guess we can get into this when we talk about Rackolgy. But he brought what he kind of wanted for to feed his deer, and I told him I could kind of help him out with that, and that's when it kind of started.
Good for you. And, we all get to a place, I like to call it a place called there. And it's sometimes it's not a direct route, that's for sure. But I feel we always end up where we should be. And life seems to go a little bit better when we do that. Hey, Jason, you're up. What's kind of your background and tell a few stories about how you got to where you're at.
Well, some of the stories can be a little interesting, but I started off going to college right out of high school, obviously, and I was originally going into wildlife management, and after about 2 years, I really didn't know what the heck I wanted to do, so I actually dropped out of college, and while I thought my story was going to kind of end there, and I was just going to keep kind of doing some normal job. I was doing construction afterwards for a while. Me and my granddad, he is kind of a huge male mentor in my life. He was kind of that person for me. He was a pastor, and so he had time when growing up. I mean, we went everywhere hunting together and trips and you name it. And so I was kind of consulting with him because I was pretty bummed. I'm like, what the heck, should I do for a living? I'm tired of doing construction work. And he's the one that kind of hit me towards the taxidermy avenue. And so I went to taxidermy school, and I've been doing that now for over 20 some years. I'm not sure exactly how long, but over 20 years professionally. And then still, I just kind of felt like there was still a void there. I didn't feel like I was getting through to people or helping people like what I grew up watching him do as a pastor. And so kind of went through a little bit of a midlife crisis, so to speak. And my wife, we're standing in the middle of the yellow dyed aisle in Herberger's when I kind of was like, I just don't know. I love doing taxidermy. I like what I'm doing, but I don't feel fulfilled. And she's like, well, why don't you be a teacher? And at the time I thought she was crazy because, I'm just, kids just don't really do it for me. And she said, well, go back to doing your biology thing, get your degree for biology, get a teaching degree, try teaching 1 year. If you don't like teaching, quit and go get lost in the woods. I'm like, you know what? That sounds like a plan, because teaching is something where I could make an impact, on people and actually help people, kind of like what I grew up witnessing. And so Did that. And it was really tough going back, after being off for like, I don't know, 6, 7 years. And so that was kind of crazy going back. But, um, I've been teaching now for 13, 14 years. And a number of years ago, I went back for my master's. So needless to say, I fell in love with teaching. Just making the impact on the kids and being able to help them and their families was just, it's just an awesome experience. And, I pretty much thought that was it for me. That's what my calling was or is, and it continues to be. But in the meantime, I decided to further my education. So I got a bachelor's in biology and a bachelor's in health and a bachelor's in education. But then I went on to get my master's in biology and actually did my research project for that on deer antler growth and kind of adjunct to that also deer herd health, like nutrition. So I really dove deep into the not only just the antler growth, but the deer nutrition side of thing. Because growing up in a rural community, I grew up around Loop City most of my life, and grew up ranching and farming with my stepdad, and just kind of watching him, what he did. And we ran between 400 and 500 head of cattle and farmed quite a few acres. So I grew up ranching and farming, and we worry a lot about our deer health or our cattle health and stuff, but there wasn't a whole lot of realistic deer health out there. And so when I was doing my research, getting my master's, I really expanded deep into this. And the more I researched, the more I realized that it got really complicated. It's, a lot of stuff on the market I found was, it was basically somebody took a cattle product like a vitamin, mineral, or something and slapped a deer sticker on it and said, here's the next best thing for deer. And you advertise enough and, people are going to buy it no matter what. And, so I did my research, which we'll talk about, the whole Rackology piece later on, but that's kind of like my education there with the master's in biology now, and continue to, obviously research since that day on, some of these various topics that interest me. So that's kind of my educational background, and always been a lifelong outdoorsman. My granddad started me hunting when I think I was 5 or 6 when I started going with him, and actually I was using a 410, shooting grouse and pheasants and stuff with him, and just fell in love with the outdoors. And I've been blessed to be able to grow up and do all those things, and just basically hunting and fishing my whole life. In fact, I suppose sometimes most the trouble I got in a lot of times at home was because I was out too late, coon hunting, or I had chores to do at home, but decided to head to the deer stand instead. And so that's I go on with hunting stories like that, which maybe we'll do some of those later. But that's kind of my background as to how I got to where we are right now. And like Eric said, in the meantime, when I came up with what I was looking for formulating wise, I went to him. But we'll get into that here when you're ready for it.
Hey, thanks for the background, because it is important to all my listeners. Whitetail Rendezvous is all about real people and real places, and I just enjoy traveling, into Canada, throughout the whole United States, and talking to guys just like you that work hard, have a moral compass set, and bring in their family, and also through it all find time enough to go chase critters of whatever size, and that's one thing that's great about where we live. And having said that, it's a joy to have you two guys on the show and spending a few minutes together. Okay, here's the $1 million question: double helix drop tines. Now, come on, guys, what is that all about?
Well, kind of a you know,
That's unique. I gotta tell you guys, I read that and I went, double helix. Okay, DNA, genetics. Okay, I get all that, but that's unique. You have a unique logo that's nobody gonna copy.
yeah, it was one of those things where, you know, when I came to Eric with kind of the formulation that I was wanting that I just couldn't find anywhere else, I said, we, we need to get this stuff mixed for me because I've been mixing in a bucket for a couple years, and so end up starting to get it mixed up. Well, when we had enough people started, getting interested. In fact, I'd finally had a ton made and sitting here and using it. And one time Eric called and said, just to let you know, we're out. And I was kind of like, well, that stuff's for us, so I'm not sure why what are we out of? And he said, well, I sold it. And at first I was like, that's not cool because I came up with this idea and was like, I really didn't want I didn't want to put it out there. We came about this totally honestly through research, and it had no monetary interest, period. And so get another ton made, and kind of a long story short, same thing happens again. And, we both kind of looked at each other, and I don't remember Eric's exact words, but it was like, I think you need to think about doing something with this. And as we started to kind of, plan a little bit, because I really was still dragging my feet at first, because I knew what I'd came up with. I knew what else was out there because I researched. Because frankly, when I came up with the stuff that I wanted in it, and the ratios and all the complicated stuff that I can explain later if you want me to, it just wasn't there. Number one, it wasn't there all in one bag. I mean, you had to buy 2, 3, 4 different products to get that. And so my concern was, my whole thing with my study was if you have healthy deer, everything else, including antlers, is just going to be a bonus, a byproduct, because you ultimately you have to maximize a deer's genetic potential. And so, that's something I think that I just kept saying. And Eric, the fact someday we'll have to post it. We got the original drawing that Eric made. I don't know, was that 3-4 years ago?
It was 4 years ago. Sitting waiting for my daughter to get done with the dance practice in North Loop, Nebraska, and I was in the picket kind of waiting, and started drawing a few things up, and I drew up kind of a double helical drop tine on the single side, and not on the double side, and I sent it to Jason. Says, well, what do you think about this? And he's kept that picture ever since. And that's where it kind of started. I was kind of Jason and Christy kind of talked about the helical, trying to maybe try to figure out, DNA, because we're, we want that, knowing that the DNA is a big part of the deer's makeup, but, health is the other part. And so I just took that helical logo look and thought, well, what is, and I kept seeing, be kind of cool to have a drop tine, and then turn that drop tine kind of morphed into a helical, and texted it off to Jason, and that's where it kind of was its inception. And we decided to do it on both sides.
Because kind of the reason why we end up with on both sides is when you get to know me, I've got my own bucket of issues, and one of them I'm a little bit OCD. And so it was kind of like having training wheels, but just one on one side, right? It just don't fly. And so when he texted me that picture, I'm like, that is cool, but we got to have it on both sides. So, go ahead and, see if you can figure that out. Well, it wasn't later. He had another picture that he sent. And so that's kind of how the double helix came, number one, and how it became on both sides was, and what's cool is just everything we've done and everything we do, not only does it go back to a passion for what we like doing, but it's cool to work with somebody that, is like-minded like I am. I mean, we think a lot alike. We're very good at giving each other corrective criticism and taking it and just working together where, a lot of times people get, upset because somebody didn't like an idea or somebody didn't like that. And, Eric is if I had to say who is probably the most, I don't know if easygoing's a word, but he's kind of my sounding board, and he can give me ideas, and I can give him ideas, and we can both say, yep, I like it, or no, I don't, and we don't have to worry if the other one's going to be upset about whether we liked it or not. We can, we just mesh real well with that. But that's how that the double helix, coming from DNA came about. Was I wanted to get back to what ultimately we were researching and concerned with in the first place, and that is maximizing a deer's genetic potential, because it goes well beyond bucks. I mean, it goes to the does, it goes to the fawns, it goes to 4 years down the road, your deer, right? Starting them off healthy through conception during mating season and healthy through gestation, which ultimately is going to lead to a much healthier adult deer. So that's that on the helix.
Well, and thank you for that, because listeners, yes, it's all about DNA, and the building blocks of everything in our body comes from that DNA. That's the formula. But if you don't have the right nutrition and protein, environment, if you got bad water, you're going to die. If you don't have oxygen, you're going to die. Well, if you don't have good fuel in your body, you're going to die. That's you and me as humans. Now, deer are no different. And so, when I kind of dug into this and got a hold of Jason and understood what he's doing, it's about growing your deer to the best genetic pool that you have. And, guys, take it from there, because that's my thought. Now, correct me, throw me in the lake, or let's go down the road together in the pickup.
Yeah, I mean, if when I was, getting kind of back to the research, what I basically did is, I went back to every nutrient, every vitamin, every mineral, and I wanted to know, because growing up, ranching, obviously we supplemented our cattle. Every agricultural industry with livestock, does some sort of supplemental feeding, whether it's chickens or beef. And so I knew what cattle needed, but at the same time, I also knew that deer needed a little bit different. And, I've consulted with nutritionists before, and a lot of them are on the agricultural side, and kind of use them as a sounding board also for what I was finding in my research. But it gets pretty crazy when you get really into the nitty gritty of it, where, there are certain minerals that have got to be with another mineral, or they won't be absorbed as efficiently or at all sometimes. And so there's a number of them that have that, issue, that they have to have a complementary mineral. Then you can go a little bit further, and you find out that now that you got these two complementary minerals together at the right ratios, there also has to be another mineral or a certain vitamin that has to be available for those two to even be absorbed and utilized efficiently. And then, you take it even a step further, and there's catalyst vitamins and minerals that aid in the secondary, helper nutrients, so to speak. And so it turns into this long chain of, well, you got to have this, but then this has to be here for that, and that has to be there for that to even be there. And it really gets complicated. And I think a lot of times, it's easy to get lost in the research and just go, heck with it. Let's just use whatever's out there and whatever. And so that's not me. Obviously, I'm the type of person that when I go after something, or when I do something, I'm 100% or nothing, and I always complete my mission, so to speak. And so that's kind of the direction I took it. And when I was done, which I've never done, I'm always researching, but I just looked into everything, and some companies had some good minerals and vitamins. They weren't chelated like ours, and some of them that were chelated, the formulation, the ratios weren't exactly what I wanted. They usually never had protein with them, so it boils down to, you have to go. I'd have to go buy protein. I'd have to go buy the vitamins. I'd have to go buy the minerals. I'd have to go buy an attractant. And so you got 3 or 4 different things that you got to put together, and, spending $60, $80 on a little pile of stuff that you put out in your fact. The one commercial we ran on the Pursuit channel that's on our website basically signifies that. It's got me walking in with one bag and Eric walking with 3 or 4 things in his arm, which he's the big guy. He's quite a bit bigger than I am. It reminds me a lot of that movie Twins, with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. I'm Danny, by the way. and and so, when it all boiled down to it, I wanted everything in one bag. I don't know why. I just always felt like, why is it so complicated? Why can't I just find what I want? And when I couldn't, that's when I decided to start making it myself. And I just kind of kept it my own little secret until, I made the mistake of showing game camera pictures of does in July that, like every good science person, you got to have a control group. And for those of you that don't know what a control is, it's an area that you leave in its most natural state. You don't alter it. So on that area, I wasn't supplementing. I wasn't giving them anything. On my Rackology sites, that's what I was putting out. And the thing I noticed first that impressed me the most was my does in July. You couldn't see the ribs like on my control group. You could see the ribs. They looked milked out. The fawns looked okay. I mean, it just looked like normal, like we're used to seeing. The deer on the Rackology was, they looked like they weren't even carrying fawns. The fawns looked sleek. And these are critters that were conceived. These fawns were conceived on Rackology, and now looking back over the years, some of these fawns that we've followed up through the ranks that have survived, they are far above health-wise from our deer that didn't get any of this. And we've got a lot of agriculture around here. I mean, I've got them going. Game cameras, pictures of them going to the pile, and there's a cornfield in the background and an alfalfa field next to that and a bean field right across. And so they're not lacking for food, but deer are not stupid. Their body tells them, they sense what they need. And, all these, everything that's in that bag, the protein, the vitamins, the minerals, all the nutrients, the attractant, deer know when they're satisfied and they leave it. They're not going to sit there and eat you out of house and home. Like, the biggest thing that we get is talking to people on the phone and they're like, well, something about your protein, or it's just protein. It's not just protein. And it's hard maybe to wrap a person's mind around it because it's not something that's been that popular to do, evidently, but it's putting everything in one bag. Now, we've got our straight, vitamin and mineral concentrate, so you can make your mineral elixir and so forth, but it's just kind of the direction I wanted to go, is have everything already pre-thought out. So, now a person doesn't have to go through the guesswork of what should I put out here and how much of this should I put in it. And, I got a number of years of research that goes into that. So I guess that's kind of how that, that came about. And then me and him have been researching like crazy since then, and have got our own, coming out with our food plot mixes and our vitamin and mineral concentrate. We got our food plot fertilizer, which if you want me to expand on, have Eric expand on a little bit more, but in essence, it's not your normal NPK. This takes your normal fertilizer and adds as many of the vitamins and minerals, as many of the nutrients as humanly possible, and putting them in a plant, which has not been available in the food plot industry until now. It's just been your normal fertilizer, which it all started with a guy in Illinois kind of asking us about, we can't even supplement here, he said. It's illegal, and as a guide, I can't do it and risk my guide business. He says, but if you can put everything in one bag into one plant, he says, I'll be interested. And that's when we'd already kind of been, looking into it, but that's kind of when I put the pressure on Eric and said, hey, agronomist, let's make this product. And he got it done. And so it's, the problem is these nutrients just don't pass through the cell naturally the way they do when you use this fertilizer, so that you can get as much of that into the plant, which then the deer can take up. And so, if you want him to expand more on that, I'd be more than happy to hand it over to Eric.
There was a word that you used, and it was about 5 minutes ago, saying what was in it, and I should have wrote it down, but we need to explain it. And it's
In
not,
the chelation.
yeah, chelation. Thank you.
What chelated is so most of most products agricultural involved is they're just your normal vitamins and minerals. They're in their they're in a little bit more complex form, and so when you chelate it, in essence, what you're doing is you're taking that nutrient, whether no matter what mineral it is, no matter what it is, you're taking that nutrient and you're putting it in the most absorbable form for absorption in the digestive system of that animal. Just like if you go to the store, and I'm not going to mention any vitamins or nothing, but certain vitamins that you go to the store and buy, you can take them all you want, and you're going to pass them through your system. The ones that are a little more expensive, they're chelated. You're going to absorb a higher concentration of those nutrients, and you're going to get more out of it. You're going to get more bang for your buck, so to speak. And so, when these nutrients being chelated, it just means that they're there's in the most simplest, most broke down form, ready for absorption, and it's far better for your critters, and you don't have to use as much of it as you would something else. In fact, some studies that I've read have stated that chelation can aid in absorption by up to 5 to 7%, or 5 to 7 times more absorbable than in their raw form. And if you think about that, if you make something 5 to 7 times more absorbable, that means you can use less and the deer utilize it better. And then, we have another additive that we also put in there that increases absorption even by another 30%, helps with the bad microbes that they can pick up in the soil. It helps their good microbes that are naturally in their gut, aids in digestion and health. And, it also prevents them from, any other issues that they may encounter in nature, like foundering around here. If a deer gets into a farmer's corn pile, they can do just like cattle and founder. And, this other additive helps prevent that also. So, we're never done researching. We're always, as perfect as we feel we have it, we're never satisfied, so to speak. So that's just kind of how we are. But that's kind of the gist of chelation.
Yeah, I feel I'm in class, not 101 either. I'm kind of like, okay, I'm getting a lot of scientific, reasoning. And folks, the big box stores have product, and they have fillers, and they have coating, and have all these things, and studies have been done, and you can go and you can pay full price for, maybe, I'm going to be kind, 60% of product. Everything else is worthless. That's just a fact, because they don't, if you're selling tons and tons, metric tons, and throughout the country, and everybody knows about food plots, everybody has to have seed, everybody has to have this and that, but you have to understand the product that you're putting on the ground to understand how it's going to affect your deer. It's going to help them. It's not going to do anything. And if it doesn't do anything, you're taking $100 bills and just kind of burning them up. And if I make some people mad about this, well, send me an email, whitetailrendezvous@gmail.com, because we really need to understand this business. It's $1 billion business, folks. Your part, if you're planting one seed and one microplot, if you're spraying this, if you got this, if you got that, and I've got a lot of friends in the industry, and their products work. But the thing is, the more we understand why our product's working, why that product works, and how we can grow big deer from the, and Jason said it, from the time in inception, it's bred, that fetus, that embryo needs the best chance in the world to grow up to be a breeding doe or Mr. Wonderful that everybody like to have on his wall. And so that's why, I'm excited to have these guys on, because this isn't, go buy a bag of seed and we're going to do it. This is what's behind the scenes. And I want each one of you to understand what's behind the scenes. And saying that, if somebody wants to reach out to you guys, what's the best way?
Well, our website obviously is www www.rackolgy.org. That'd be RACKOLOGY.org. And we're on Rackolgy LLC on Instagram, Rackology on Facebook, and Rackology on Twitter. So we're about as many places you can be social media wise, and that'll get us connected to us.
And then also, you can get on the website and find our email, which is rackolgyllc@gmail.com, and send us emails or inquiries or questions as well. So
we got healthy deer, and so what does that mean to your hunting? What you said, you got a control group, and then you've got your Rackology group. What herd do you hunt?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, we hunt both. I don't, hunting wise, and this gets back to kind of me being OCD and anal or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if that's the right word for it or not, but I don't like to overhunt a stand. I don't like to overhunt a spot. I don't like to go in when the wind's not right. I'll wait weeks to hunt a spot until the conditions are right. And so, there's a lot to be said about, success wise. Sometimes people they might, just by default have great genetics and great deer on their property. But they don't seem to harvest, or have, problem even seeing these deer. And not that we have giants on our place, by no means, but success comes more from playing your cards right and knowing what stands to hunt, the right when to hunt it. Scent control is huge. I mean, I know there's a lot of stuff on the market that works, and there's a lot of stuff on the market that doesn't work with scent control. It's something you kind of have to experiment with and find out on your own. Because I mean, everybody's body chemistry reacts with those products differently. But ultimately, it just boils down to common sense hunting and not over hunting a spot. And so we hunt both of our spots, and don't want to overdo it in an area.
When you think of age class recruitment, from year to year, is your control less? I would think it'd be less than the Rackolgy group, or are they similar, but the deer are just smaller and don't, they don't fulfill the potential?
Well, I mean, your harvest weights, and this again, you got to compare apples to apples, and that's the biggest thing I run into. The public, and it's nothing against them, and literally what we're running into is we have to re-educate the public on, our product, on why and so forth, and same with just deer biology in general. If you're going to compare the weight of a deer, you can't compare a 5.5-year-old to a 2.5 or a 3.5-year-old. You got to compare apples to apples. You got to compare, what do they got to eat around the spot? If my control group was clear out in the hills where they had nothing but grass to eat, that would be an unfair advantage to, that would be skewing the data, or cooking the data, as we say in the science community. So both of my spots I've chosen, my control in our Rackology area, they both have the same type of crop fields around them. We do notice, better body condition, better body weight, healthy. They seem, a lot of research is subjective also. There's not always numbers involved in research. When we look at our fawns, how well they look throughout the summer months, and our does. And to me, I really focus just, you talk to anybody in the cattle industry, they don't always, it's not that you just focus on the health of your bulls. You're looking at the health of your cattle, right? And so your cows. And so we're looking at the health of our does and our fawns and seeing, what do they look like all summer, all fall, all winter, back into spring and so on. It's not that we can go out there and check their weaning weight like you can do with cattle, but we definitely notice a difference in their body condition, and as a byproduct, so to speak, of our product, the bucks just happen to benefit well too. In fact, the only way you could really, everybody, a lot of products on the market say, hey, we can grow giant deer for you. Well, um, truth be told, about the only thing anybody can guarantee is we can maximize your deer's genetic potential. But if your buck has only got the genes to produce and max out at a 150, we can't pull a 180 out of our hind end for you. But that goes into genetic. If you want to start managing your herd towards those bigger deer, obviously you got to start letting the ones that have the genetics survive long enough to get those genes into your herd. The first time you see a big buck on your property and you whack it, did he grow up there? Was he already spreading the genes? I mean, it gets pretty deep if you really wanted to get into deer management. But overall, though, I mean, we definitely see a difference in our herd health and fawns and antler growth and everything else.
And one thing I'd like to add in here as far as the control versus, the Rackology groups. And you ever going to see kids like in a candy store, it's Jason and I coming back with our cards from our trail cameras. Sometimes I get more of a kick out of catching a deer on a trail camera almost is seeing one on the hoof. Nothing beats a feeling of actually getting a downed animal that you've been patiently waiting for and trying to harvest. But bringing those SD cards back, putting them in the computer, or being out there with a handheld and seeing what you've got, sometimes that control versus Rackology, it gets really interesting for us because we can catalog the does and we can catalog the bucks. We can start, we age deer every time we get a consistent picture of a consistent buck. We age those, and to me, going into both areas, it's just going and just kind of that anxiety you got, what you got, holding in your hand with that SD card. What are you going to see when you get back? And sometimes it's a dud. You don't see too many big bucks or a lot of movement. Sometimes you'll have 6,000 pictures on a trail camera, and over half of them are herd photos. And being able to pick out, what your product is doing for those, and pictures can tell 1,000 words. And that's why trail cameras are as important in our business as soil sampling is on the fertility side, I think. So not just seeing them in the hoof, but catching them and knowing their travel corridors and where to catch those deer and pattern them is huge. And that's just as exciting as I guess harvesting one sometimes, especially when you've put all the work into and knowing the science behind it and knowing what you're trying to accomplish. And that's like what Jason said, we're trying to re-educate the public on what could benefit that buck of their dreams at moments of its conception, and hopefully keeping that doe healthy through the lactation time frame, get good healthy milk to that young buck or that young doe. And one of the neatest pictures we've got is a doe eating from a feeder, eating our Rackology while a fawn is suckling right behind her. It shows that full circle, I guess, of what happens out there. So.
Yeah, it does. And in the warm up, we talked about hard work, and sometimes people look at guys like you, and people are buying your product, and they look at people on TV and go, "Gee, I'd like to be, I'd like to be there." So let's address the hard work that listeners need to understand what goes into developing any kind of product, and share some of your thoughts on that, and then we'll wrap the show up with some shout outs.
All right. Well, getting into this, like Jason said, we came into this honestly, having a product that he wanted. And he was like, we always say, he was kind of like a mad scientist over his pot kettle of brew. He didn't want to share it. He didn't want to share it. And I knew it was a good product, and I was hoping he wasn't getting upset with me when I was selling it. But when the light bulb went off for both of us, when I said, you've got something here. And the hard work, getting into the outdoor industry, there's a lot of misconceptions that people are getting paid to hunt. People are getting paid to, that it's easy. What do I need to do this? How can I get to where this person's at? Product wise, it's a long, hard road, and we've been doing this for almost over 4 years. And, I hate to say that, there's a lot of times you're in the red, and you just got to keep hope and educate and get out there and talk with people and let them know about your product and how, not that our product is better than one other or how to, but what separates us from what's out there right now. Just the logistics alone, I always tell somebody, if you come up with a product that's tangible that you could put on the end of an arrow, or maybe it's the arrow itself, or maybe it's bowstrings or a different type of ammunition. I mean, when it's tangible and people could see it, it's a little, I might get a lot of people that get mad at me for this, but it's a little easier to sell in a way. When you've got a feed product that you don't see, I mean, you dump it on the ground and you hope it gets taken up by your deer, and you hope produces results. And there's a lot of things on the market, like we talked about before, that are on the shelves that are full of fillers that, a lot of it, number one is salt. And yeah, deer will come to salt and they'll lick it up but it's not, it's not doing them any health favors. It's just basically getting them in front of your trail camera or getting them in front of your hunting stand, depending on what state you're in. So, there's a lot of stuff on the market or on the shelves that you got to compete with. And when you get into a feed, it's even tougher, in my opinion. But knowing we've got a product and knowing the research behind it. And Jason's, when it comes to hard work, Jason has done the framework for almost 15 years now of when he got his master's. And that's a lot of the hard work. And then the hard work comes now is trying to prove to people with trail cam pictures, we do a lot of shed studies. And we've got documented sheds for, some deer up to 7-8 years. And so I guess to get into the outdoor market is a tough world. It's a growing world, which is awesome. I love to see new people get exposed to the hunting world and what's available in the outdoors, especially if they've had no upbringing in it. It's just neat to see youth and people that are even older that are finally getting into hunting, that light bulb goes off in their head like, hey, I like this. And that's what we like to be a part of with this product is getting it to people and to help them either manage their herd, help their hunting success. I guess looking back on it now, selling the first couple tons out from Jason in a way, then I'm like, well, what have we done now? Now it's going to be a lot of work, but every time we do something and I look at it, it's a time when I was sitting there thinking what I want to do. And I wanted to do agronomy. I want to be in agriculture. And this is another one of those things where it occurred to me that this is where we need to be. And I love doing it. And I don't care how hard the work is. It all pays off in the end. And I guess that's my take on it.
And I forgive you for selling those.
Yeah.
Okay. Stop the presses right now. Okay. Why did people buy it? Okay, you sold it. But one, how did they find out about it and why did they buy it?
Well, I guess Jason's always had a network of hunting friends with his taxidermy shop. I'll let him get into that. But I own a shop right on the highway in Loop City. And Loop City is only a town of 900 people. So, it's a pretty small community, tight knit.
It's got a country club. And it's got a reservoir.
Yes, it does. It has the Loop City golf course. Yes, it's got an awesome reservoir. Great habitat around there, and that lake is a huge part of our community. I hate to say it though, but I've lived here since 2000 and 2000, a little before 2000, I guess 99 when I moved up here, and I've been on the lake 4 times. So I guess we do a lot of hard work, but it is enjoyable when you get out there. But yeah, it's a small town, and I own a business right on the highway, and people come in and they, I guess how I sold a couple of the guys, talking to them either playing basketball or if our kids have something together. Yes. And I think I mentioned a few of them, like, yeah, you should check out this product Jason has, because they were either buying it something else or just mixing their own stuff. And They're like, you can just get that just in a bag and dump it out. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's, and then them guys knowing Jason and how focused he is on what he wants and knows it's just not a bunch of stuff in a bag. They're like, oh, if Jason's using it, then I'm going to try it. And so they'd come into the shop, and one guy'd buy 5 bags. He'd tell his friend. They'd have pretty good luck getting stuff in front of cameras, and then all of a sudden his friend would come in, and then before you know it, a ton is only 40 bags, and before you know it, a ton sounds like a ton. 40 bags doesn't sound like that a lot, but before we knew it, it was gone, and I had to call and tell Jason. I'm like, oh, well, I'm hoping this is all right, but it's gone, because I knew he was going to come in and get some, and so that's how
you didn't give it away. You sold it, right?
I sold it. Yeah, I sold it. Yeah,
so
we didn't
made some money.
Yeah, I made Jason some money, and we kind of actually that first Jason said, let's go ahead and get another ton, and so we did. Now with his taxidermy shop, he had the kind of the same thing happen with guys coming in and ask him, and I don't think he was he was a little more reluctant to let people know about it right away. But once it started kind of getting around that it was kind of the real deal, that it started kind of moving out of our warehouse a little faster.
Well, and one thing, coming from the taxidermy standpoint, I'm blessed to have a number of my, the people around here, my students that I do taxidermy work for, that I teach in school, and so I get to see a lot of deer, but I get to see a lot of deer that the people can tell me history on it, right? Like where they live, if they're in the hills, river bottom, what they feed them, what they eat, etc. And so, that was also kind of part of my research, which was crazy, is, deer that, and I actually just did a short piece on Instagram and Facebook here just last weekend about this in my shop. I held up, I had 3 different sets of antlers. I had a 2.5-year-old buck that I'm holding at first, that it's a nice 2.5-year-old deer, but the antlers feel like porous and almost gritty, sharp, and they're lightweight. And, he's a former student of mine, and the deer is, fed strictly, protein. I mean, they pour the protein to these deer. Then I have another deer that's it's a 5.5 is what I aged him at. He's a nice, nice mature buck, and he starts off kind of solid on his base and frames, but as you move up to the tips, it starts to get porous again, and he's holding velvet. And then I hold up another rack that's solid, and it's only a 2.5-year-old deer, but it's a nice, solid feeling rack. And the big difference are that I know about these deer's history, these bucks, is the deer that are only fed protein. And that's one of the battles that we fight with re-educating the public, is everybody's like, oh, what kind of protein is it? I can just I can get protein that's a little bit cheaper. Well, you can buy straight protein cheaper, true. But it kind of works like this. Protein is the antler matrix. Some part of the deer, the antler growth cycle, it can be anywhere from 30 to 40% protein. And a hardened antler, sometimes in the growth stage, it may get up to 70-80% protein at a certain time, but ends up being around that 30-some to 40% protein. But that protein acts like a scaffolding, a matrix. So it'd be like if you put your wooden laths on your wall. That's like the protein matrix. And then your minerals have to come along later, and they get deposited. They take it off of their skeleton that was stored there over the winter months. They take it off of their skeleton and essentially cement those wooden laths. And then it ends up being, around 40-ish% minerals. There's about 11 different minerals that go into antlers, approximately. And so, in essence, what you're doing is you're growing this great matrix, and you might be growing what looks like this big rack, but in essence, it's weak. And so you end up with a lot of broke-off tines. And some of you out there are going, well, that makes sense now. Everything's got to be balanced. You got to have the right minerals and nutrients and vitamins to complement that protein and make a complete solid rack. Now, is this going to prevent tines from breaking? Well, no. I mean, you get a couple bucks fighting pretty hard, and it's not a foolproof there, but it's everything's got to be there. It's just like anything. Too much of certain things is not a good thing. And so, I've got I'm fortunate that every year I see tons of racks, and I get to study them and find out their background and what they ate, and really see the proof that certain feeding programs, especially if they're just really one-sided, are actually doing more harm than good. And that's kind of an indicator. If you notice bucks in the during hunting season that still have pieces of, still have a little bit of, have a number of like velvet attached to it, that tells you that deer's antlers weren't done growing yet, but the body said, hey, dude, we can't spare any more mineral. Our bones are going to start breaking, so you're done. You've grown, and this is where it is, because those minerals get put on that skeleton in February, March, and April. They get stored. And then once they're turned into deer mineral and stored, on the deer's body, then come spring, they begin to get pulled back off of the skeleton to start forming from the antler pedicle and producing that antler. And so that's kind of cool to see that come full circle from a hunter standpoint and from a taxidermy standpoint and a science standpoint. And I don't know. My wife says I got too many squirrels running up in my head, and sometimes I do. I too many directions.
No. And I was just looking at the counter. I'm going, we got to knock this off. But I could take a 5 credit course from you, and I think I might learn a little bit. I'm being facetious. Well said. We're at the time, guys. We gotta wrap this up, and we'll talk, after we wrap up. But give some shout outs, and then we gotta call it a show.
Well, we want to make a shout out to first our families, and my wife Lindy and Jason's wife Christy for putting up with us. Our kids that make us motivated to do what we do. And then we'd also like to do a shout out to all of our current dealers and future dealers that have trusted us and come on board with us and knowing our product. We think highly of all those guys, and that, and we'd like to do a shout out to the hunting community and people like you that are willing to listen to us and help us in our venture.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. It's just a blessing to be able to do what we do. So obviously I got to thank the good Lord for that, because that's, a lot of doors have been opened for me that I didn't necessarily seek out. And so it's kind of, it definitely is a blessing, not only to be doing this, but to be working with Eric and having the experiences we are. And like he said, our family being as understanding as they are, because, sometimes we spend a lot of time on the phone when we should be probably hanging out with them and the kiddos and stuff. So, yeah, that kind of sums it up for me anyways.
Well, Jason Obermiller and Eric Fitzgerald, thank you on behalf of thousands of listeners across North America. Folks, if you listen to the show, you're going to learn something. If you choose to apply it, that's your choice. But you can't say that by listening to Whitetail Rendezvous, you're not getting some of the best information available out there on what it takes to have a great deer herd. And so on behalf of our listeners, Jason and Eric, thank you so much for being guests on Whitetail Rendezvous.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, the next episode's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to meet with Bill Anderson, Shoot to Thrill Outdoors. What does that mean? They just love the outdoors. He and his crew hail out of Missouri, and folks, they just love to get out and mix it up with all sorts of ducks and geese and turkeys and whitetails. It's going to be a really interesting show.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.